communicate about it. This is a calm, safe space for family-style dining, where a child can explore their autonomy, yet have supportive relationships from their peers and teachers. When you encourage toddlers to participate in routines like pouring or serving, they become more self-sufficient and take pride in their attempts and accomplishments. Routines and schedules help foster healthy development and build self-confidence. This is just one example of a responsive routine with toddlers. How does your learning environment support responsive schedules and routines for the toddlers in your care?
That's a good video. Okay, very good video on the things that we need to do when it comes to, we know a little bit about, can always learn more about the development of children, but what does it entail when we're actually working with them day to day? So that's one of the main things that we look at. We look at the personal care routines, but then we also look at the fact of, do we have a daily schedule for our infants and toddlers? And as we say, they develop best when nurturing teachers modify their schedule. Your schedule needs to meet the children's needs, not meet our needs. And a lot of times, we find that that's what we want to do. We want to tailor it to what works for us, but we got to tailor it to what works for the children, as we go along. It's actually supported by what the children are doing and through your observations that we look at. So it should include what you would normally do on a typical day. We know that things change, depending on whatever may happen, as we go along. So the daily schedule for them is something that is important for us to have. So that schedule, that's the reason why we do the experience plans. We want to make sure that we are offering children experiences throughout the day to explore at their own pace. It's not all about, you gotta sit here and you gotta listen to me. You can just do different things with different children when they're ready for it, and that's what we look at. You always have your caregiving routines. How do you greet the children in the mornings when they come in? Is there some type of ritual that you use? What do you do when you're feeding them or eating, or the children are eating? When the older ones are eating, we should be sitting down with them, not over them, but sitting down with them. When we're feeding babies should be held in our arms, as we feed them and everything. And then, how do we move children throughout the day? From one thing to the other, after they've had snack, or how do we prepare them to get ready to go outside? Do we just pick them up, stick them in a stroller and go? Or do we say, guess what? It's time for us to go outside. Granted, once again, there may not be any language there with those young babies, but we are telling them what's coming. And what's coming and what's coming. And that's what children need. Because there's nothing worse than not knowing, what actually needs to be done. So it needs to be predictable, as they tell us. So with this schedule, as they talk about, it still builds those routines around their natural habits of what works for them. So with a daily schedule, your daily schedule should include some of these things. They got to get here. So when they arrive, when do they eat? When do they have their indoor experiences? And babies, we know, nap whenever it is that they need to nap. So we look at that. When is diapering and toileting? How do we know when that's going on? When are you going to be doing some small group stuff? You may have a couple of children sitting together, maybe doing a few things. When do they eat? Once again, how often are you changing diapers? That's the thing that we look at. How often are they being fed? We have to have a basic something to go by, so we'll have an idea. Instead of, if you had a substitute, you don't want the substitute to walk in the classroom blind, not knowing exactly what's going on. And then once again, some other activities, developmentally appropriate activities that are being done, and how do children leave? How do we prepare them to leave? We just scoop them up and take them out? We want to be able to do that. But at the same time, parents also need to know exactly what their child did for the day. So what we have an infant daily report and a toddler daily report for each child that says when they ate, when they napped, when did you change them, when they were wet, when they had a BM, How was their just overall day? Were they fussy? Whatever, kind of things. Parents need to see this so they'll know exactly how was my child today. You can't just say, oh, my child was fine. That don't mean nothing. There could have been like, I had an old babysitter years ago that the newborn babies, all they did was sleep all day because she said, I'm just going to let them sleep. And I don't have to do anything. They wake up, I change them, I feed them, I put them back to sleep. That's not how it goes. We need to be doing more and more with them. So Nina has a copy of that, to try to kind of show you. Along with that, when we're talking about a daily schedule, yes, ma'am?
So I start off doing that in the beginning of when we start, but pretty much every single parent that I have tell me to stop because it's a waste of paper and they throw it in trash anyway. So as long as I say that they poop today, that's all they really care about. So is it like something that we have to do because
it should be what we have to do. Well, their parents, they don't have to care, but at the same time, tell them what we're obligated to share this with you. Now, what they do with it after they get it, if they want to throw it away on the way out the door, then so be it.
Okay. Just for me, in my aspect, it's wasting my time if they're going to throw it in the trash because it's a lot for me to right now. Every time I change, every time I do everything, and they're just going to throw it in the trash. That's wasting my time.
I understand, but however, once again, there's still going to be that one parent that still may want it, but according to, when we're talking Head Start, licensing, parents are supposed to be given something in writing to say how their child was. And this could be something that the advocates can probably, when they start to enroll and when we start to have like parent orientations and stuff, to say that you will be receiving this on the way home. You got something to add? You want to add to that?
I was going to say too, even if they don't accept it, it's good to keep for your records. Because say for instance, if Head Start does happen to come and they just happen to, because all people that come out to do, I guess you could say observations or come out for reviews, every person is different.
Yes.
So one year a person may not even ask for it. Another person another year may say, oh, by the way, can you show me how you keep a record of your infants and toddlers? So as long as you have a record of it, I mean, you give it to the parents, but that's keeping you as far as how you run your classroom and how you keep records of your children. That's a safe place for you to say, okay, well, here's my information that I have for my students. Now the parent may throw it away or whatever, but you can safely say, as that caregiver and that teacher, I have record to show that I'm keeping track of my children's developmental needs during the course of the day.
Or you may just have a parent. I had a parent one time that swore up and down her child was never changed. I would see her coming and I would change her child. She would get home and call back to the center to say, my child hasn't been changed all day long. I don't know why y'all let him stay in that wet diaper. No ma'am, here's my proof. It's right here. He was changed at this time. See, and I told her I changed him myself this time. So, and they had the little sheet. She didn't believe it. Well, she was kind of crazy anyway. But you always have that one parent that drives you nuts. So it's like Nina would say, it's our proof, because Head Start says if it's not documented, it didn't happen. And we don't need a parent coming back on you to say you didn't do this and say, no, I'm sorry, it's right here. I have it written down. And this is what happened during the day. That way you can justify diapers, wipes, any of that stuff to say, because I changed your child and I've got all of this, every day you see I've changed your child because he excessively wets or he may have excessive BMs and I have to change him. This is why I need more diapers or whatever, some kind of thing. So it's always a case of, it's kind of like more covering you. Because it's just matter. Okay, if I'm gonna change you, then I'm gonna put on him, just write the time on it, and I'm gonna keep it moving from there. Kind of go from there. So that's the reasoning, that we look at that. So did that kind of answer your question? Okay, so then we look at schedules. Especially in the older toddlers, they need to see a daily schedule of what goes on, basically. And they can see themselves. So it's like, you say if it's welcome time, welcome, and we eat breakfast, then we got it on here. We got the time on here. we got exactly what it is, so that way they can see, and then they will begin to understand what comes next. It's no surprise, and they won't be saying, what comes next? What am I supposed to do? Anything. You know, so this is something that we talked about at the beginning of the, in pre-service, that everybody should have some type of schedule, a picture schedule for children to be able to see. So that's something that we know that we need to have, and that satisfies Head Start and also satisfies licensing as well. So in order to be able to enhance this stuff, this is the stuff that we need to make sure that we're doing. Talk to each individual about what you're doing. You always talk to children in a positive tone. There should not be any yelling, because I know children will get on your nerves, because that's just life and that's just how they are. Some days they're wonderful and other days it's like, what happened? What happened? But there should not be any yelling going on, raising your voice. We should not be losing our tempers with young people, because they're little and they're learning. And I always say, somebody took the time to teach us different things, we can do the same thing. You know, so that's what we are actually here for. So when time is spent in those interactions, you know, you always want to encourage children when they're learning. You're changing their diaper, you could be singing a song, you could be doing a nursery rhyme, you could be talking about their shoes, talking about how many fingers they got on their hand, you know, something, you know, as we're going along. If you're talking about feeding an infant, they said, you can describe the food and the taste. Ooh, I smell the peaches. Do you? You know, don't they smell sweet? You know, so once again, you're helping with that language, and you're using those pictures on that picture schedule to show, okay, guess what? We've had lunch and we've gone to the potty. Now it's time for us to take a nap. It's time for us to lie down. You know, so that way it helps the older infants anticipate what's going to happen. Then you say, after you wake up from nap, it'll be time for snack. You know, so it gives them a sense of time. We're teaching them about time and they don't know it. Like, this happens here, but then we're going to move over here and it changes, and then it changes, you know, so as we go along. So time spent cuddling. Time spent cuddling an infant during feeding builds a relationship between the teacher and that child. That's a foundation for learning, and we are talking to them then. We are not just holding them, we are actually having a conversation. When you saw the caregiver, when she was feeding the baby, yes, I'm giving you your bottle, and then it's going to be time for nap. Just conversation. Oh, you had a fun-filled day today. You know, you crawled around, you did this, you did this. That's what we need to do. So we want to be able to provide those opportunities, and we need to, other things that we need to do. Position yourself where you can see everybody in the classroom. It's nothing worse than having your back turned, thinking you're taking care of one child, and the other ones over here are doing who knows what. Because in the blinking of an eye, something can happen. So we always want to make sure that we can see everybody and we're doing different things with them. One of the things they said earlier when we were talking about enhancing their care routine is not to have babies laying or sitting in containers. I call them containers. Those bouncy seats are containers. Those
Swings?
Yeah, swings. I mean, it's okay. Licensing says if a baby falls asleep, then we can leave them there, but we don't need to. Why? Because if you leave a baby in a container where their little spines are bent like this, they're gonna be bent like that too. It's just like using a piece of Play-Doh. Those babies need to be put in the cribs. Those cribs are in there for a reason. So babies, when they fall asleep, should be put in their cribs. Now, if they fall asleep on the floor, it all depends on what licensing says. But we just don't want them having an arched and always sitting. Because babies, how do you feel if you had to sleep in the chair all the time? It's like, wait a minute, I just need to stretch out some. So we want to make sure, you know, that that's what we're doing. And allow opportunities for the little ones, especially the older ones, to be able to do things for themselves, feed themselves. They can help learn to set the table. You know, put a couple, something. You know, they should be able to help begin to do those things because that gives them more ownership in their classroom as they're older. So you demonstrate to the children the steps in washing their hands. Talk about what you're doing. First, we're gonna put some water on our hands, and then we're gonna put soap on it and rub them together. We're gonna sing the birthday song while we, whatever. Have the pictures of it step by step, as it goes along, and so they can complete that from there. So those are the things that can help to enhance it. But then, as we look at that, then we switch over to, let's talk a little bit about child abuse. Let's talk a little bit about how we're supposed to be handling children when they're in our care. Children are never to be picked up by their arms, their legs, their feet, their fingers, their heads. There is a way to pick children up. We have a handout on that of being able to basically bend down and pick them up. But we should be using 2 hands at all times. Because I'm gonna tell you, in the plain reality, the quickest way to be jobless is to abuse a child and not pick them up like they're supposed to be picked up. The quickest way to lose a job is to be yelling at children and treating them harshly. Children will do things that will drive us nuts. And if you feel that there is a problem and you are not having a good day, then ask somebody, call Brandon and go step outside and stand by the stop sign when it's cold without a coat on. That will bring you back to reality. Because, it's the reality of it all. Our job is to make sure these parents are entrusting their children to us. We want to make sure that we are keeping them safe at all costs. Make sure that when you're in your classrooms, that curtain is rolled up at all times so anybody can walk by and see. Because if something happens, and if the curtain is down, and we don't see it, how are we gonna help you? So that needs to be up unless there's an active shooter, and hopefully we'll never have one of those come up in this building, to do anything. So what you wanna add?
I was gonna say, today we wanted to touch more on what institutional child abuse is, because we always hear about abuse and neglect when it comes on the parent side and being mandated reporters. So what I did was I wanted to pull up something, Gretchen and I, and discuss institutional child abuse, which is the flip side of when it happens when it's out of the parent's care. Mm-hmm. So for instance, like at a Smart Start or another child care facility, it could be any type of instance that happens outside of the care of the parents, but it's with a trusted adult and that the parent leaves their child with. So it's very important, again, like Gretchen said, how we handle our children, how we pick them up, how we interact with them. All of that comes into play when it comes down to, if, a parent suspects that something was done to their child in a harsh way. And when children are young, they react different than older children. They may, and we have several examples of different types of abuse that may happen at the workplace, but just to be cautious and mindful of how you handle children, because things can happen so quickly in a blink. Mm-hmm. And it's just very important. We're in a day and times where, you're being watched, it's on camera, and even if you're not being watched, it's our job to keep children safe, because, to be honest, they're with us more, with you guys more, than they probably are with their parents as far as their active part of the day. Right. By the time they get home, most likely it's like dinner, bath, and most likely bed. Mm-hmm. But their time with you is like their most active developmental time, where they're going to interact, be engaged, get into things, disagree, agree with their little playmates or whatever, be upset, get hurt from time to time, but in a way that it's not harm that's being caused by us as the caregivers.
Because it is hard. I can remember just being in childcare at one time that the teacher wanted the little boy to do something and he decided to run, and she went to grab for him. Mm-hmm. And she scratched it. Yep. The father wanted her. She was going to go down to the courthouse and swear out a warrant because he said this teacher abused his child. Mm-hmm. And she shouldn't have put her hands on him, which she shouldn't have. Mm-hmm. He wanted her fired right then and there. So that was a sticky situation that, we don't want to be in, we don't want you in. So we want to be very careful, to cover yourself, but cover ourselves, and also just take care of the children the best way that we know how, and to not, You know, like I tell people, it's like super nanny. You got feelings when you come to work, you might be ticked off about something, leave it at the door. Leave it at the door, you come in and do your job. You smile at your children, you engage with them and do different things with them. You know, and talk positively to them. And if you feel that as teachers that you need to discuss a child, do that away from that child, because children can hear. They can hear. And we don't want things to be said that they can go home and repeat, because they will once they get that talking and stuff going. So here you got your signs of abuse, and I'm sure you remember these. Physical abuse, grabbing the child by the arm, leaving bruises. Corporal punishment. You know, corporal punishment is not limited to spanking. It could be go stand in that corner. Don't come back over here because I don't want to see your face. It's like, oh my God, I don't think so. Or the child seems frightened of a staff member. You know, we don't want that. Of course, you know, we know sexual abuse. Children are afraid to go to the bathroom because of whatever reasons. Emotional abuse. Never shame a child because they have wet their pants. I gotta change you again. I just did 5 minutes ago. Or, how many children are famous for putting their milk down and putting it in an interesting place where they knock it off the table? Man. We just cleaned that up. Well, guess what? We're gonna put it off again. Let's get our stuff and come on, let's clean it up. Now, I just put it over here every day. This is the third day in a row you spilled your milk. Or knocked it over. That's emotional abuse. Children don't need that because we all make mistakes. You know, so that's not what, you know, we want to do. A member belittles or shames a child in front of another child, and that drives me nuts. Can you believe? Man, I'm telling you, that the mama then already has 6 kids and she having another one. I mean, she can't even take care of this one. What in the world? Look at what he's got on. Children can hear. They're not deaf. You know, keep those comments to yourself. Or calling a child and a name. You've been so bad today. Children are not bad. Children have bad days. And I tell everybody that. We all have bad days too. And then it's just overall neglect. Takes an unscheduled break, leaving the class out of ratio. That is a number 1 no-no. Now we understand you've got to go to the bathroom sometimes, but you don't go to the bathroom or go out and say, I'll be back, and you go on for 25 minutes. That's neglect. You know, you are not taking care of that child. Or you withhold food, which I've seen, and a lot of teachers don't seem to understand. They put the food on the plate, but I'm not going to give you your dessert until you eat your food. Says who? That is food that needs to go on the plate, and you can eat it in any order that you choose. Because actually, in talking about nutrition, your fruit should be the first thing you eat anyway. Why? Because fruits, if they're eaten after you eat your regular food, give off certain gases, and sometimes that irritates children's stomachs. So if they choose one to eat the applesauce first, so what? You know, as long as they're eating, that's the thing. Letting a child cry for a long period of time. Anytime a child is left crying and they are not attending to it is too long. Because it could be, while we might not think it's something that's important, we may think it's trivial. But it may be something important to that child where they need that nurturing at that point. So we just want to make sure that we are not doing any of these. We want to refrain from doing this and give children the best that they can possibly have as we look at this. So, you know, that's extremely important, but it is important when we're talking about the physical aspects of everything to make sure that we are bending down and picking up those children, not only protecting ourselves, but definitely protecting that baby. Because a child being picked up by their arm may create either you pulling that child's arm out of the socket, or they may get what they call a nurse's elbow. So it's kind of like a sprained elbow, not to mention the spine and the neck. You know, so we have to think about those kinds of things. You can do whatever it is that you do at home in your own home, but when you're here, we need to make sure that the things that we are doing are developmentally appropriate and correct for the children in our care. You know,
and I just want to add on to question when for the child crying for long periods of time. Again, that goes with communication, because some of them cannot express, I'm in pain or my stomach hurt. So them crying like that, that's their way of saying something is wrong.
That's right. And we have to be able to read those cues. as we go along. So, and with that, and we talk about leaving your cares and woes at the door, we look at what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in terms of guidance and positive discipline, for children. Supervising them at all times, of course. Redirecting them to do something positive. If you see that they're doing something they have no business, let's just go over there and say, hey, come over here and help me do this. We'll have that and make it a positive thing, but never the corporal punishment, never yelling, because let me tell you, y'all are in the building, y'all never know who's coming through the doors. And I am one of those that I can stand someplace and you will never know I'm in the building, and I'll hear everything you have to say, and I won't say nothing until the time is right. So we need to be mindful. We need to be very mindful of what we say to children, of making sure that we don't isolate children, we don't withhold things from them. We give them everything that they need. And remember, like she was saying, in this day and age, things are on camera. Mm-hmm. So that camera is in that office, for a reason. It puts a check on us. We need to keep ourselves in check, to make sure that we're giving children everything that we need. You've got everything that you need because you've got the reporting abuse policy for PCDC, where it tells you what you need to do. We are all mandated reporters. If you see something, it is best to report it and it not be an issue than to not report it and something happen. So as a mandated reporter, we need to make sure that we do our due diligence and make sure that every child in this building is taken care of and is safe at all times. Because stop and think, if you have children, would you want that to happen to yours? So we want to make sure. So we've got that policy, and I always go back and revisit that policy and kind of think about it, as you go along. So these are just some things to remember. When you're talking about your routines, you can say to the children, talk about what you're doing, discuss what's going to happen next, those kind of things. Be familiar with your families. Know your families. Like Jocelyn was saying, she knows her families. They may not necessarily want that paperwork, but at the same time, get them to understand, but this is a necessary part of my job. I have to make sure that you are aware of what I've done during the day when you've left your child in my care. And the same thing with being able to, like we say, talk about what comes next. Being able to have that routine and that schedule so children will begin to learn what comes next and what comes next and what comes next. And in that way, that helps eliminate behavior issues when children are not made to wait for things. So we want to be able to allow them to explore things in the classroom. That's what those materials are for. Now, granted, if you don't want to clean it up, then maybe that is another job for you someplace else. But children are supposed to make a mess. They're supposed to make a mess, and we're supposed to help them be able to clean it up, and go from there. So that's what we are there for, because they're learning about their world, and they're still young. So those are the things that we actually have to keep in consideration. This is just a bunch of references of where I've gotten all this information from. The virtual lab school, the last one that showed about the infant toddlers being able to, their everyday routine, that is a wonderful website that covers a lot of stuff. They actually have training modules. Mm-hmm. Very good things. I use it in my early childhood classes at the community college. Just so you know that there are always resources out there that we can attend to. You've got the high scope first 30 days book. You've got the other little handout resource that I had shared with you. There are also some other websites and things out there that give you ideas on some things that you can do with them. But our main thing is to make sure that our care routines and our guidance are in place and are tight, because that's the main stuff that they're going to be looking at when the review comes back through. We want to make sure that our interactions with these children, that you're happy that you're here and you're talking to them, you're singing to them, you're in the floor with them, you're doing all kinds of things, and not just sitting there, because we're not babysitters. Babysitters is a little old lady around the corner who sits me in front of the TV and they watch Coco Melon all day long. But we are early Head Start. So we're giving them an early Head Start, and that Head Start has to start with all of these things that we've got here. So with all that said, questions, comments, concerns? Are you still awake?
It's funny how like when this is youngest group of kids that I've had the pleasure of working with, so all ages, and watching how creature habits even babies are, and it's neat that I'm always a advocate, like throwing little curveballs at the children to see what the reaction will be. If you come in, use the bathroom, wash your hands, blah blah blah, and they usually eat when they first get here. If you delay that a little bit, the kids like, so where's my food? So they know exactly where the routine is. They know what's coming. So it's neat to watch that, throw little curveballs, figure out do they get it or not, and then bring it back. So it's neat watching the routine, how changes affect them too. So.
And it's also important to, I think it's also important to have parents accountable as to the scheduling as well, and respect you guys as teachers. Like, you know you eat a certain time, and if you have parents that sporadically bring their children here and there, they need to respect their child's schedule and your schedule as well, because at a certain time, children anticipate. After a while, they know that at this time we do this, or we eat, or we play, and when they miss that, that can change your child's behavior as well, because their schedule has been thrown off. So it's very important that, and I'm a firm believer in that parents and teachers, parents have to meet teachers halfway in ensuring that their child gets what they need during the course of the day. And if that includes getting them here, so they have a sense of what a full day is like, and that daily schedule, and what's happening one thing after another, it really helps the child as well.
And another thing that will throw children off is that inconsistency with attendance. Because some children can they can roll with the flow. Some children are really good with, it's gonna be a change today, I got something different, but then there are other children who don't do change well. And they don't adapt to that. I think, wasn't somebody crying earlier? They weren't up for the change. Weren't up for the change. You know, especially when we talk about the younger ones and their attachment. You know, they become attached to you, and when a stranger comes in, that's a problem. You know, some will find it, okay. You know, I think in Ashton's room, she got a social director, so she just talks to anybody. You know? But there are some, it's like, I don't know who you are. Don't know who you are, I'm gonna stand back here. So I used to try to stand back and not get involved, because I don't want to, it's already enough for them to know that there's a different person in the room. But I don't know who that person is, so I wanna make sure that I don't disrupt that. So we have to take that into consideration, and that helps, with these care routines as well. We have to be the ones that are consistent across the board.